Now, Republicans don't get off either. I'm still a registered Republican. After 20 years of promoting America, God, and country, which they said the Dems were trying to destroy, they turned smack around after 9/11 and look at the attacks they've launched on us. They launch warrantless searches of your home while you're not there, or if you're served with a warrantless search, which now comes in with simply some kind of an administrative order, you can't even tell your attorney about it to probably try to get some redress, because that's a felony to tell anyone that you've been served by this functional warrant. All right? We thought torture was all right, and this is where the think tanks come in. You know, just days after 9/11, all of a sudden, there was the question, do you think torture is necessary to fight the war on terror? And I went, whoa, where did that come from? Well, that comes from one of these think tanks. You know, there are all sorts of them out there, Council on Foreign Relations, people are members of them, and there's sort of a revolving door of money and personnel between government positions and these think tanks, Ford Foundation, Carnegie. There are some that are dedicated to mind programming. And so what they did is, this was a float. They float these things as trial balloons to test the reaction. They're pinging the public to see how far they can push. I thought, where did that one come from? Do you understand that if you can say that somebody's an enemy combatant and he can be disappeared indefinitely, do you know how many parts of the Bill of Rights that violates? And once you set the precedent, it was just like with forfeiture. Don't ever believe the promise of any politician that when he or she says, well, don't worry, we're just going to use it over here. Oh, yeah. Right. There's not a single example where when a door hasn't been opened through the firewall, that it hasn't immediately expanded to include all sorts of areas where it was never intended to go. And besides, most of our legislators don't even read the bills that they're passing. They don't know what's in them. I only know one legislator in Idaho. Of course, I don't know all the legislators. But he would stay up all night reading all the bills he was going to vote on. That was one of his promises to his constituents. They literally don't know. Do you really believe that the Patriot Act was written right after 9/11? The Patriot Act was around since Oklahoma City or even before that. All right? They couldn't get it through. There was a lot of outcry against this. As okay, yeah, we've had a tragedy, but this violates the Constitution. So it went back on the shelf. Actually, it went back into the hard drive, somebody's word processor, and pop, out it comes again. When we have agreements like NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, or the Security and Prosperity Partnership, where do these things come from? It's not your congresspeople writing it. It's somebody somewhere in some think tank who's creating this. In this case, the think tank for the Security and Prosperity Partnership in the North American Union is actually the Council on Foreign Relations, which has been bankrolling Robert Pastor, just like it bankrolled Jean Monnet, who was the father of the European Union. I want to get to that in just a sec, but I'm watching my time here too. How are we doing so far? How's the old lady doing? Bill of Rights, not the Statue of Liberty. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Boy, this is getting shredded all over the place. Freedom of the press. You know, they once tried a press tax, but of course that was found unconstitutional because it was seen as a control to throttle the press. Power to tax is the power to destroy. Fairness doctrine is one war that's being launched again against broadcast stations. And the Fairness Doctrine requires that any station provide equal time on any subject which it covers of controversial or political nature. Well, given talk radio today, that's an impossibility for stations to fulfill. And it ties the stations up in paperwork and threats of prosecution or lawsuits from the government, and so therefore the stations just say, well, we just won't carry the talk shows. It's a move to shut down free speech. On college campuses, political correctness is now enforced. It endangers the students there who might wish to speak out. It also endangers the people who have jobs there and hold politically incorrect positions in everything from science to sociology. There's government-sponsored political correctness in almost all of our programs called consensus process or consensus thinking. Dissenters are not allowed. Everyone has to be in consensus. Let's go to Amendment 2. I already talked about this. Well-regulated militia. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. 20,000 gun laws and infringement. You know, if you can take any one of those rights and regulate it, as we're told, down to the point where you can't exercise it, then that's sort of infringing, don't you think? And I dare you in some states, on the left and the right coast, try to get a concealed weapons permit. Just try it. Right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Well, this amendment's falling apart. we're just not secure at all. I talked about forfeiture before, the ability to seize process or property just on the allegation that some crime has been committed. The property is charged with the crime, not the individual. That's why you'll see in notices in, let's say, USA Today, the United States of America versus $100,000. Okay, the property is charged with the crime. We have government invasion at every level, from mental health to what we teach our children, to what books we read, to what we check out of the library, to what drugs to take, to wanting to database everything about us with biometric identifiers. We've already talked about warrantless searches. I even think property tax needs to be rethought, because now you have to pay rent to the government at the county level. Even if your property is paid off and you own it, if you don't pay your rent every single year, and lately they've been in the business of raising the rent, if you haven't noticed, then you can't stay in your property. So there's no permanent ownership of property anymore. Under income tax, assets can be seized with little due process. Frankly, the whole income tax needs to be abolished and a simple tax system put in its place. You can't reform it. All you can do is kill it. A simple sales tax, say, for example, would eliminate fraud, because the people collecting the tax and the people paying the tax are two different people. It's related to your income, because the more you spend, the more you make, the more you spend. It's a very elegant system, easy to do, would eliminate an incredible bureaucracy and put an army of auditors and CPAs out of business. Or they'd have to go get a real job instead. The most distressing thing I keep hearing from people who have encounters with law enforcement officials, social workers, and others is they're being told, you have no rights. It's chilling when I hear that from law enforcement officials. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Well, this is where it gets dicey. The only time a person can be held is in a time of war in the military, but, it's Congress who's supposed to tell us we're in war, so are we or are we not? Congress can't decide. We have a war on terror, but they never voted for it. It said, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to twice be put in jeopardy of life or limb. Well, they've got a workaround on this one now. First of all, they charge person with multiple counts. This is I call it buckshotting the prosecution. Just hit them with 150 counts. One of them will stick. Okay, now if it fails at the federal level, they turn around and prosecute you at the state level. And you go through it all over again. All right? Now, if that fails, then they sue you, all right, in a civil suit. So the whole intent of that part of the amendment has been just blown away by the court system. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial. But under the Patriot Act, people can be detained indefinitely, and much of the trial, if there is a trial, conducted in secret. You're supposed to have a right to know what the accusations against you are, but that could be a national security issue, and therefore you don't. Your attorney may not even be allowed to know what the evidence against you is. So we're actually changing that one. If you look at each one of the amendments to the Constitution, every one of them is being demolished. The one I really want to talk about is the trial by jury for just a second here. I just got through reading the jury questionnaires, both for federal courts and for one state court system. What they're trying to do now in the courts is to direct the outcome of cases by controlling who gets on juries. The concept of jury nullification, which is as old as British common law, is why we have 12 people on a jury of your peers. And the jury was supposed to, separate from a magistrate or a judge who's being paid by the government. The jury of your peers are supposed to look at what the prosecutor says, what the court says, what the law says, and the circumstances, and make a decision. And if the jury decides this whole thing is a trump-up, even if there's a technical violation, they have the right to pitch it out. That's why we have a jury system. If the judge is just going to make the decision, get rid of the jury. We don't need him. But now they are trying to keep people from getting on juries who understand parts of the law, who want to know what the law is. There have been judges that have stomped out of their courtrooms because the jury kept saying, well, they would come back during deliberation and say, Your Honor, we want to see the law. No, you can't see the law. Well, we've got to see the law because we need to know what the law says here and there. And they would fight. And so finally the jury would say, okay, not guilty. We're not going to do this.